You are listening to Lone Star Community Radio on 104.5 KCZWLP Conroe and 106.1 KZCCLP Conroe and worldwide on irlonestar.com.
Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this week's edition of the Weekly Business Hour. I'm Rick Schissler. I'm the host of the Weekly Business Hour. I'm also a Silver Fox advisor and the founder of OneBestConsult.com. I think we put together a real good show for you this week. I hope you enjoy it. Most importantly, which is one of the main things we do here on the Weekly Business Hour, is it gives you some ideas, some answers, a way forward on a situation, a problem that you may have, a challenge that you're working to meet. And if there's nothing in the show that does that, always remember, just drop us an email. Send me an email direct to me, and I'll respond to you, even on your own business challenge, the best that I can. Our email address here is Rick, R-I-C-K, at irlonestar.com. So this is what we're all about. We're about helping small businesses get the answers, to learn, to get education, to make their businesses the best they can. We're going to start off, though. I have a question. I like to start the shows with questions these days because Lord knows there's lots and lots of questions out there for us in business. It's a fast-moving situation for all of us. My question of the day is, okay, wow, end of the year. I mean, what do we have left? A couple weeks or less? I mean, it's amazing. What should you be doing right now if you haven't already done it with the end of the year just coming roaring right at us in the next 10 days, 2 weeks? Well, the first thing I suggest is you close out the year, and what you do, not talking about your financial, not about your books, but I'm talking about some things you do. Checklists, that's one of the things that I find business people are a little hesitant to do. For what reasons, I don't know. It was something that served me so well during my business career and owning businesses. And what I mean by a checklist, end of the year checklist in this case, certain things that have to be done around the business. Why not put together a simple checklist, or checklists, plural, that you can open the book, bring it up on your computer at the end of the year? Because frankly, you do it once a year and you don't need to miss anything. This should be really simple. So put together a checklist or checklists. And I do that, like when I had a business I started, I hired my first employee, had a second employee, but then it slowed down. I went to another level. It took a while. It was 6 months before I hired the third employee. And by then I'd forgotten some of the things that I had read up on and prepared to hire people. So I put together my notes and the forms and the questions and put it aside so that when I cranked up 6 months later and needed to hire someone, I just went and looked it up, reviewed it, and within a few minutes, 15, 20, 30 minutes, I was ready to do what I thought was a first-class job in interviewing people and hiring them into the business. It's all about having those checklists and keeping that information handy. Old inventory, one of the major things. Everybody has old inventory, stuff that's gathered dust. It's been there for the full year, right? And technology's moved on, whatever's happened. Figure out something to do, because physically you don't need that inventory where it's taking up space, and it, most importantly, when you walk by it, you say, man, what can I do about that? And you probably ask yourself that question 2, 3, 20, 50, 100 times a year. It's a waste of time to do that. And finally, clean out your old files, digital, paper files. Go through them, clean them out. Stuff you don't need to access, get rid of them, because they slow you down, and they will slow you down in 2022 if you allow it to. Remember that the broadcast today is recorded. It'll be available on Wednesday, broadly out there on YouTube, Facebook, various social media sites, as well as right here at the radio station at irlonestar.com under the Weekly Business Hour tab. So please, if you missed something, or really if you could share it, we would appreciate it. So we're going to go to our first guest today. It's a recording I made. I think you're going to really enjoy this one. I may be a little biased because our guest, I know him. He's a fellow Silver Fox, also an attorney, which I have a law background as well. And I'm going to share the recent conversation we had with Joseph Tung. As I mentioned, he's an attorney. He's a member of Grable Martin Fulton, very unusual law firm, a virtual law firm, which is interesting way to deliver his services. And we're going to talk about why every small business needs an attorney. So I think you'll listen to this one because the really good businesses, the ones that are doing well, the ones that have been successful, it's one of the things, one of the elements I have seen. They have good advisors, okay? Good advisors. Yes, representation in a lawsuit, quality representation is important, but an attorney as a professional like a CPA, et cetera, good advisors. So Joseph and I think, had a really good conversation recently, and I want to share it with you. So please listen and hear the conversation with Joseph Tung, business attorney. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to have a visit today, as I promised you, with Joseph Tung. Joseph is a lawyer of some renown. He's a small business lawyer, has worked with a lot of small businesses on a variety of legal issues, worked as an advisor, and all the other great things that a lawyer should do and represent their client. And for full disclosure purposes, Joseph is a Silver Fox advisor like I am. So that's how we know each other. We met several years ago when he became part of that organization, and I admire the way he approaches his work, and he's been a great member of the Silver Fox organization. Joseph, thank you for taking time to visit with us today.
Thank you, Rick. I appreciate the invitation.
Well, I appreciate the legal. Part of my philosophy is that every business needs certain advisors. One of them is a lawyer, CPA. In fact, in my most recent work that I've done with clients, I almost won't work with a client unless they have an accountant, have a lawyer, hopefully have an insurance person that works with them as an insurance advisor / insurance agent. Just some of the things that I think a good business has. So let's talk about the law today. What is your background so that our audience can get up to speed to who Joseph Tung actually is?
Sure. I'm a partner at Grable Martin Fulton. We're a distributed law firm with offices in Dallas, Austin, and Houston. I opened the Houston office a year ago. I'm the director of the office in Houston. Distributed means that we have offices, but we don't primarily office within our office. We work in a virtual format, working both in our clients' offices as well as from home. With COVID, we've been much more flexible and working primarily by Zoom, but also in person if need be. I've been practicing law about 20 years.
Just take a second. That's a very interesting way to deliver services, as you mentioned. Is that becoming a more common form or model for professionals, law firms?
For me, it's been my model. I had my own practice for 10 years prior to joining GMF, and that was my model. And so it was a good fit for me to join this firm in the middle of the pandemic. Several firms have tried to adopt the model in the sense that they've either gone to some type of, part-time or shared time or co-shared space to cut down on the overhead of lease office space. As you probably know, there's a lot of commercial space available right now. And the idea of signing a long-term lease and having a lot of lawyers pay for all that overhead that's not being used doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It doesn't deliver a lot of value to the client. So there are firms that are moving that model. We've been in that model for 7 years. Like I said, I was in that model for 10 years prior to joining the firm.
Well, it does mean one thing that just jumps out at me. You have to have really good communication and IT skills as well to be able to move from office to office or back to your home office.
Correct. And you have to also be comfortable with clients that are also comfortable with that as well. A lot of my clients are very technology savvy and they prefer that model. They don't like the idea of having to come to a lawyer's office every time they need to talk to a lawyer.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I actually have had a relationship for 10 plus years with a client that I have a desk and a computer there that I come to their offices because sometimes because of what they do, they can't meet right at the exact time. And I've set aside times, but I got a space there. I sit down and work. So I even have a phone on my desk if I need to use that. So yeah, that's kind of what you're doing. So it's kind of neat. A great way to deliver services, a lot more effective and efficient, I imagine.
Correct.
Well, I interjected when I introduced you about a lawyer. And I find that many people, small business people, particularly individuals, but small business people don't really know what a lawyer is. I mean, they know if they need a legal document, if they got to sign a lease, they've got to do some kind of registration, form a corporation, incorporate their business, whatever. But lawyers really can offer a lot more services that are, in my opinion, very valuable. So talk to us a little bit about the kind of services you offer.
Sure. My general practice is to provide what's known as general counsel services, which basically is to provide a suite of business services to companies that range in size from small to medium to large companies. Generally speaking, those companies are either in a startup or a growth or an exit phase. You'd mentioned prior, I'm going to go ahead and describe what lawyers do. In America, lawyers, attorneys, and esquires are all pretty much the same thing. In other jurisdictions, like let's say Great Britain, you have solicitors and you have barristers, which have different designations. One can appear in court and one cannot. In the United States, if you have a law degree, you have what's called a law degree, but then you have a licensing. Each state licenses separately. So if you're licensed in the state of Texas, you have the right to appear in court. A lot of times you don't need a lawyer, an attorney, or an esquire to appear in court. And so a lot of times the attorney that's providing you services is just in an advisory capacity as opposed to representation capacity in court.
You know, that's a great division for folks to understand that, you know, and I'll even take that further is I was trained back in a family business that an attorney was a trusted advisor, and that we actually had quarterly meetings with our attorney to go over our business, what we were doing, what we were thinking about doing, new business ideas, new businesses, to get a sense and get their input along with the accountant and the insurance agent and all those people, kind of a touch base thing, just for advisory work. This was not to do any legal work, not to create a contract. Even though one of those businesses, we actually had to write a basic contract to be used day to day in that business. So it's kind of a rental business that one didn't exist. But do you do a lot of advisory work? In other words, I've got a great business idea. Do you come to the table and talk to me about it from a legal perspective and maybe some of the ups and downs that might be there legally?
I do. And my original training, most lawyers are trained as specialists. There's no specialty requirement in law school. But for whatever reason, I think a lot of law schools tend to push young lawyers to get a specialty because that's the best way to get a job. So law firms will try to insist that you specialize. And I was originally trained as a litigator. And, you know, after about 4 or 5 years of litigation practice, my parents, who are small business owners, found that my litigation skills were not particularly useful to them because they were rarely involved in litigation. I ended up joining a large oil company, which was useful in the sense that I got to understand what the advisory role of a lawyer was. And so now I was part of the business decision-making team, as well as a legal department that had over 100 lawyers. However, that was for a very large corporation. So again, for a small business, my parents didn't find my skills particularly useful. Given the fact that I went to law school at home, well, I went to law school at SMU, but I lived at home. And my parents did fund some of that education. They were always wondering, well, what's the usefulness of a lawyer if it's only to provide skills and services to large corporations? And so that's when I started my own practice about 12 years ago, and started working with small businesses. In that role, I started realizing advisory skills and advisory services were much more important than the specific specialties that a lot of lawyers offer.
Well, you know, it's interesting. You say your parents encouraged you that as small business owners and their role as a small business owner. And, you know, I kind of alluded to that earlier, that when I evaluate a new client, a prospect, I look for, again, one of the things on my checklist: do they have a group of advisors, or are they willing, which I would be glad to help them, connect with people and understand the advisory role. Like your parents are saying, well, what value is it if you can only work with large companies? But there are lawyers out there, and I count you as one of them, that can be a true advisor to the business. And again, to me, it's a sign of a business that has a real chance to be successful short term as well as long term, that the owners of that business seriously understand that it's very important to have these people available and familiar with your business, et cetera, et cetera. What do you find is the most, how do I want to say it, the biggest objection to a small business or business hiring you or hiring a lawyer? What do you find? What is it that people are concerned about? I mean, I grew up in a time when it was fees or, the fact they didn't know our business, whatever, on and on. What do you find out there in today's world?
I would say for small businesses, it's almost always cost. And for most small businesses, they typically hire for specific tasks. And usually it's a pain point. So some type of occurrence has occurred that causes them pain, and they're trying to evaluate the cost benefit of paying a certain amount of money to hire a lawyer to take care of that particular pain point. There are two different types of situations that usually would result in somebody hiring me. One is a specific task. The other one is strategic. My long-term clients typically come to me with strategic issues because we've resolved most of the pain points. My new clients typically come to me with pain points. And so then it's an evaluation of how much is this going to cost me? And so our firm and my practice is designed to be flexible on our fees and also be very upfront and open about the different ways as to how to address a pain point, especially with cost in mind.
Well, let me ask you about that before we take a breath here. Fees, I mean, there's a lot of different ways for an attorney or other professionals even to charge for their time. What are some of the most common approaches that you find or that you utilize in your practice?
So hourly, flat fee, percentages, or project. So an hourly fee, typically you would hear anywhere from $100 to $1,000 an hour, depending on what the lawyer does. A flat fee would be, for example, a contract review would be $500 to review a contract, however long it takes. Percentage would be what you see in these personal injury contingency fees, where the firm will not charge you anything, but upon a recovery, they'll take a third of the recovery. And then a project fee will be a long-term kind of consulting with a statement of work that will have milestones and project fees as you go along.
And let me ask you this, we talked about it serving an advisory role. Do you have any kind of structure, or have you seen it with other attorneys or law practices where you're on a retainer in a sense that you are available and meet with the client, to just serve in an advisory role? Is there any type of fee structure that sort of brings that into play?
Yeah, so it's become more and more common, especially for larger organizations that want to have an outside general counsel team that's available. So they'll do what's called a subscription rate, right? And basically it's very similar to what I described earlier, it's a monthly rate, a flat rate, but it's designed to say, we have this whole team available to you at a certain specific monthly rate of X, and for Y amount of hours. So this amount of lawyers for this amount of hours every month, whether you meet that amount of hours or not. Obviously, those are for bigger organizations that would need a team of lawyers to assist them.
Yeah, it's funny. I know a couple lawyers that look for that kind of work and specialize in the small business arena. And you're right, but they will find businesses, depending on industries or stuff, that need that kind of advice, kind of like rent a CFO or rent a controller, right. Rent a lawyer. That sounds like a TV commercial. I think
it's called
tires,
fractional general counsel or fractional CFO is the common term that's used now. Our firm does a lot of that work for our organizations, for our clients, that as they grow, they find that having only one or two lawyers available to them every month is insufficient as they have more and more projects, especially in the M&A space where they're trying to acquire assets or other companies.
Well, I hope you're enjoying the conversation that Joseph and I had, and I hope that it gives you ideas. And if you don't have an attorney as an advisor as well as a legal representative, I encourage you to get one. We're going to take a short commercial break. Come back. I want to continue that conversation with Joseph Tung, attorney at law.
What can the Better Living for Texans program do for you? You can learn how to increase your consumption of fruits and vegetables, choose foods that are relatively inexpensive and good to eat, make your food dollars last longer, prepare quick, nutritious meals, help your children learn how to eat healthier snacks, and much more. Our program is committed to helping people like you improve your health through providing research-based nutrition education in a friendly, cost-free, and relaxed environment. We are Texas A&M AgriLife Extension, helping Texans make their lives better.
Hey y'all, it's DJ Mike from Dance Time in Texas. Join me Monday through Friday at 8 a.m. as I count down the top 10 Texas Red Dirt songs that are packing the dance floor. I'll be featuring local artists and the story behind the hits, shows in the area, as well as new songs that make you want to dance. It's Dance Time in Texas with DJ Mike on Lone Star Community Radio, 104.5 KCZW and 106.1 KZCC, Conroe, Texas, or online, irlonestar.com.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for staying with us. We're going to continue the conversation we're having with Joseph Tung, attorney at law, represents small businesses as an advisor as well as a legal representative. So I hope you'll listen to the interview, and when at the end of it, we'll recap. So please listen to the continuation of the conversation with Joseph Tung. Well, we've been visiting with Joseph Tung. He's an attorney. He focuses on small, medium-sized businesses in his practice. And got a what I call broadly a virtual practice, and we'll talk about that. Joseph, one of the things is when we hire a professional, we hire anybody really, is setting expectations. And when I hire a professional, and as you mentioned, one of the big concerns for a small business typically is what the fees are. What's it going to cost me? And there are other issues. They don't, you don't know my business unless you've worked for me before. But how should one, or how do you go about working with a client to set reasonable expectations so people know what they're going to get in return for what they're going to pay for those services?
So I do a few things that are probably a little bit different than most attorneys. The first is I set time aside in the beginning of the relationship that I don't charge for, basically to review documents and have several conversations with the client. I don't tell them exactly how much time I set aside for them. But I do tell them that I don't start the engagement process or start the charging of the fees until I get a good enough feel for what their business is and whether or not I can help them in their business. And usually what that involves is a lot of exchange of documents initially. One of the expectations I set initially is that I need to know that they're comfortable in this format of exchanging information either by email, text messages, phone, or Zoom quickly enough that they'll respond to my speed, because my speed is very fast. So if it takes them weeks and weeks and weeks to send me documents, it's not going to matter how fast I am. And so one of the first expectations I set with them is, how fast will you respond if I respond immediately? And if they can respond in kind, then it's usually a good sign that the relationship will move along. Since COVID, the ability of a small business owner to jump on Zoom or jump on some platform and to see us because we're not going to meet in person is also another indication that they have the ability to talk to me and to also communicate what they need. So that usually sets expectations a little bit more reasonably up front. A lot of times they're just asking questions that we provide pretty regularly, let's say on our roundtables for the Silver Foxes, and I don't charge for that. A lot of those initial what I call Google questions, if you can find the answer on Google, I'm not going to charge you for it. What I will charge you for is if I actually have to do work on behalf of the business. And so whether it's a filing of a document, whether it's a drafting of a document, a court filing, representation in court, or on behalf of your employees or in front of your employees, preparing any type of settlement agreements, these kind of things, litigation, that's when, you can't Google that, right? You have to actually have somebody represent you and prepare documents and prepare representation. And that's when the fees start. I like the way that we do everything. We bill very succinctly. And so there's a very strong expectation of this is when the bill comes. This is when we expect it to be paid. It's done very meticulously. We have a very efficient software as well. And so there's no confusion. There's no delay. There's no sloppiness in the way that we do things professionally. So that's all done in a way to set up kind of a very professional expectation, because I think before COVID, people thought of things virtually as being not that trustworthy, right? It's subject to potential fraud. Now we see it as something that we have to do. And so those that were ahead of the curve and were doing them professionally beforehand really have benefited, and our firm is one of those.
You know, I was thinking as you were talking about it, and as you kind of went through the steps, because as you develop a relationship with the client, even if it's just one project, which in my opinion comes from, to some extent, from building expectations, but I actually had to terminate an attorney one time because they wouldn't send their bills out on time. And when I say on time, we discussed the expectation. I wanted monthly bills. It was important to what I was doing to get them, and needed them within a reasonable period of time. They agreed to that, and then they immediately, you know, you wouldn't get a bill for 2 or 3 months, and it just created confusion. And it was a big project. I mean, it was an ongoing over a year's period of time. And I finally I did it, and actually took them to lunch and tried to one more time, try to go through. And they were a fairly sizable, well-respected law firm, but became convinced it was just the system, their culture, if you will, they had in place. They just weren't going to do it. So it's very interesting. I have found expectations, particularly if I'm not really comfortable or have experience working in an environment such as with a professional, with a lawyer, it's even more important that people understand. And I think a lot of attorneys miss the boat, that they don't take the time up front, not only no charge or no billing for being familiar, but to explain to the client. One of the things I've found valuable, as I do in my advising mentoring practice, is I always ask clients, you know, what is your expectation? What are your goals? What is it that's most important for you to achieve? Even to the point of writing them down and following up with questions. Like when I was a litigator, I would tell people quite honestly, because I'd been on both sides of the coin, which made me a little bit unusual. I'd been in litigation and as a litigant, as a client, and I'd say, hey, the worst place you can end up in this litigation is in a courtroom, because we're going to end up picking 12 strangers or whatever the jury count that was required, and they're going to decide the fate of these issues or this issue. I said, as we work through this, and I would talk about that, particularly in the last 90 days or whatever, as we approach trial, encouraging settlement if that was what they wanted to do. Any special things that if I'm a small business person and I am talking to a lawyer about handling some work for myself, on my side, as far as expectations, what should I be key to?
So I think a lot of small business owners feel uncomfortable talking about money, and I don't know why. I think they should be more open about what their budget is, and where their expectations are. I find that business owners that are comfortable telling me that, I think there's this fear that lawyers are going to raise the rates, and one of the right, or they're going to overcharge. And I think, you know, if you have this fear that your lawyer has a disconnect between you and your business goals, then you've got the wrong lawyer, right? So if your lawyer doesn't understand business goals and budgets and finances, you've definitely hired the wrong lawyer. So if you walk in with the expectation of fear that your lawyer is going to take advantage of you, that's not a healthy relationship. And so I encourage my clients to say, look, this is, if we're in litigation and the goal is to settle the lawsuit, it's okay to tell me that. It's okay to tell me that this is the budget. If you want to tell me that the budget's 10, but it's actually 20, that's fine. I'll work with 10 and make sure that we get it at 10 and get it settled for 10, including my fees, whatever that is. It gives me a parameter to work around, right? And so if I can get that underneath within that budget and successfully, then you win and I win. If we start not being honest with each other about what the budget is, it gets out of whack pretty fast. And I think a lot of times there's this belief that business owners have to be their own best advocate. And so they start doing a lot of DIY, and so they start practicing law themselves, right? I always say that my biggest competitor with my clients is not other lawyers, it's my clients, right? Because they'll do, if they can't get a hold of me, they'll just do it themselves. And so a lot of times what they think is that they'll just call up the other side and they'll settle the case themselves. And I've seen that happen multiple times, right? And what ends up happening is the other side will take advantage of them. And of course, it gets out of whack. And so for me, I always encourage folks, if you don't have enough trust in the relationship to be able to talk about the basic finances, bills being paid on time, bills being invoiced on time, what the actual budget is, what the rates are, a lot of law firms, big law firms, have this automatic incremental increase every year. We don't do that. I think I understand why law firms do that, because they have to keep up with costs. But if your firm does that and you don't like that, you should fire your firm, right? And you should hire a firm that you feel more comfortable with their rates and how they charge you, and that you can have that conversation with them without ever fearing that your lawyer is trying to swindle you, right? So for me, that expectation of communication is first and foremost about business.
You know, you make an excellent point there, and perhaps let's kind of dig a little deeper. I'm a small business person. I need to hire an attorney, or I think I need to hire one, or my spouse told me I need to hire one, whatever the circumstance. What is the process, or what steps should I follow to try to assure that I make the right connection, that I find the right lawyer for myself and for my business?
So I think the first step is like anything else, that where you need to hire, or you need to find a coach, you need to find assistance, is what is the need? So addressing what your needs are. So like any other need, whether it's a medical need, whether it's a legal need, depending on what you need. So if you need cancer help, obviously top of the line is MD Anderson. You can ask around, you can go to your general practitioner, you can ask for your other friends and family and say, where am I going to find the best cancer doctor, et cetera, et cetera. The same is true for lawyers. You can ask around, but I think it's most important to find out what your needs are. And so if you're in a situation where a lot of people have, just random business ideas, right? Oh, I'm thinking about patenting XYZ. That's a very specific, almost random idea that you can almost Google, right? You can Google and say, these are all the patent lawyers available. It's probably better if you know somebody that's a patent lawyer, or that you know somebody that you trust in terms of finding a patent lawyer. But if you're looking for something more broad, right? So you're not looking for a cancer doctor, you're looking for if you're a general practitioner, your GP has decided to retire, and you're looking for a doctor to look for your overall health, that's different. That's a much more intimate relationship. Somebody that you may need to trust with a lot more things, depending on your age, depending on your goals, what you're trying to do with your health, depending on, and in this case, by analogy, what you're trying to do with your business. So a lot of folks are looking to exit a business. That's a different goal than, let's say, growing the business, or handing it over to your kids, or trying to acquire more or sell the business. It depends on what your goals are. And a lot of lawyers aren't set up that way. They're set up to say, I'm a contracts lawyer, I'm a litigator, I'm a transactional lawyer. And so that formulation doesn't really lead itself to finding the right lawyer. And so, like anything else, I think the best way to find the best lawyer is find out what your goals are, and then work your network to see who do you know that could actually help with that.
Yeah, you make a good point there, and kind of wrapping things up here today, exiting your business. What's your sense? We were all told probably 5-10 years ago that due to the baby boomers and all those population statistics, that a lot of business owners would be in their 60s, 70s, and would be exiting their businesses, selling them, closing them down, passing them on to someone, their family. Have you found that to be true? Is that an increasing part of the business opportunity you see out there?
It is. In all formats, right? So whether it's selling it to a third party, handing it off to parts of it to family members, parts of it not to family members. There's also the work till you die model, right? That my parents are going to work till they die. They refuse to hand it over to anybody or sell it, which is fine as well. There are things that you can do for that, different models you can do to take care of your health, your long-term care insurance, and these kind of things to make sure that your business can still support some of the health insurance and some of the other the factors if you really are going to work until you die. But yeah, that's a huge part. Prior to joining the Foxes, almost all of my clients were older than me. And so the primary focus of their business was figuring out, how much longer do they want to work?
Yeah, that's something I work with a lot, the exit strategy. As our good friend Monty would say, you need to decide that the first day you go in business. So, and I try to work clients to do that. It's an amazing process. And maybe you can come back and join us at a later date, perhaps in the new year, and talk about some of the legal points, some of the issues that need to be considered when you're getting to that point where you want to exit your business. It's a very, very big transaction for most people, perhaps the biggest business transaction they're ever involved in. So,
yeah, we usually combine. Our firm specializes in the estate planning, tax, as well as the exit, the sale of the business. So all three of those work hand in hand.
makes a lot of sense. Well, Joseph, I can't thank you enough. Again, thank you for taking time to join us today. You're such an affable individual, and always enjoy visiting with you. If folks want to get in touch with you as a follow-up, they've got questions, perhaps looking for an attorney, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
You can reach me by phone at 832-390-2237. You can reach me by email at joseph@tung.com. We're also on the internet at grablemartin.com, GRABLEMARTIN.com.
Again, thanks so much. Great advice, great perspective. You really do have an understanding of business as well as being an outstanding lawyer. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, Rick.
Well, that's our conversation with Joseph Tung. Hope you enjoy it. He's a wonderful individual and also, I think, a great small business attorney. If you want to get in touch with him, you can just simply email him at joseph@tung.com or call him 832-390-2237. That's 832-390-2237. Coming up in the second half of the show today, we're going to go to the mailbag first. We had someone send us an email talking about or asking questions about what they needed to do as far as planning for the coming year. They are not a planner based on what their email said, so I offer some basic ideas and guidance to that. And our One Best Consult tip of the week: what is the key to making your business successful on social media? It has become such an important part of really any business as far as advertising. So we'll check in on some ideas about making your business successful on social media. So please stay with us. We'll be right back.
Listen in Mondays at noon to hear Conroe news from local nonprofits, businesses, upcoming events, Conroe Park events, news stories, and information that matters to you with your host, Margie Taylor of Taylorized PR. For more information about being a guest, visit irlonestar.com/Conroe Culture.
What is homelessness? Have you seen parents struggle to find a job without having transportation or childcare? What about the children sleeping in cars with nothing to eat? Families shouldn't have to struggle to survive, and children should not be homeless. Family Promise of Montgomery County serves the needs of homeless families and their children. Learn about ways you can help and learn about partnership opportunities at www.familypromiseofmc.org or call our day center at 936-441-8778.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. You're listening to the Weekly Business Hour. I'm Rick Schissler. I'm your host, and I'm glad you're with us today. We're going to get to the mailbag in just a minute, but I want to remind you that if you have questions, if you have a comment about the show today, questions about your own business, you're going to hear one of those questions shortly that was sent in by a listener. Please send them to me, rick@irlonestar.com. That's RICK at irlonestar.com. Love to get those questions. Love to get the comments about the show. We have built this show over the last 8 years around those comments and understanding what you're looking for, what you're hoping to get out of listening and watching this program. So the mailbag, one of my favorite segments, to take a question from a listener and try to respond to it and offer some ideas of how they can meet the challenge. Well, Mr. John Stewart, asked this question: in the past, I will admit that I've not done much formal planning. What is a good way to start putting an annual plan, business plan in my mind, together for my business? Well, I think what's most important, particularly if you haven't done it before, but I think this continues throughout your ownership in business, and that is first and foremost, keep it simple. Now, whether you have one employee or 100 employees, I think you always have to kind of run it through that idea of being simple. And what I'm trying to say is you keep it simple, especially if you're starting, because you've not done it before. So keeping it simple helps that. But once you're up and doing business plans and you understand the importance of planning, then keeping simple is still good. If nothing else, so you can communicate it, so you can share it, whether it be with a banker, lawyer, CPA, or hopefully you've got a team, you've got people working for you. Somehow you're getting their input. Everybody does it a little different, but keeping it simple allows it to be a better communication that you can share with people. Some people do a summary. If you're doing a big formal business plan that may stretch over 20, 30, 50 pages or more, you always produce a summary, and that's what you share. But in the case of many small businesses, a simple one-page plan is available, and I encourage you to start there. The second thing is you've got to commit, if you're starting out like John is, you've got to commit to taking a look at that plan, to review it on a regular basis. My suggestion is monthly. At least once a month, the 30th of every month, the first Monday of every month, however you want to do it. Open the drawer, figuratively speaking, and review the plan. Shut the phone off, quit doing what you're doing, and take 5-10 minutes minimum and just look at the plan. Take it home with you at night and after things are done, before you go to bed, whatever. But take some quiet time, right? And review that plan and see where you are. And that kind of leads into the next thing is you need to commit to accountability, John. When you're building a business plan, make sure that when you set your goals, objectives, that you are willing to be accountable to those goals and objectives, so that this is the way the plan helps you. If you're going to meet or exceed those goals and objectives, you personally, first thing you do, you've got to commit to those. So you've got to take on accountability. That is difficult for some people based on my experience, but it is, otherwise you're wasting your time with the plan. If you don't pull it out occasionally, look at, you're wasting time. I mean, unless it's something you commit to memory and you're the only one involved in it. But I still think pulling it out of the drawer, pulling it up on the computer and saying, I'm going to take a few minutes and look at it and see where we are, how are we progressing. That leads into other planning eventually, but I won't get into that now because you want to check off at least quarterly that you've met your quarterly goals so you can get to your annual goals. That's something for another discussion. The other thing is flexibility. Now, there are people that really do a lot of planning. There are experts that teach people how to plan. They'll probably shoot me. But you've got to build some flexibility in for those exceptional situations that may or may not occur. One example is COVID back in 2020. We made plans in 2019 that we were going to execute in 2020, but within the first quarter, the whole world turned upside down. Some of us were able to reap the benefit, but most businesses suffered to some degree. Some really suffered. You cannot plan for that kind of event. So don't stress over it. If something happens like that, then you need to pull that piece of paper out, bring it up on your computer, and say, okay, how's this business going to be successful in this totally new environment, this major thing, this major situation that's occurred? How can we make our business successful? Some people say, how can we help it survive, right? Whatever that means to you. So be sure you understand in the back of your head, there's got to be some flexibility. Don't say, we got to do the plan, got to make it happen. Build your plan around actions, accountability, review, and make it work for your business. You will most likely, if you do this, you're successful, you will do additional planning. We'll get a little more detail. You will spread and get more people involved. You will share the accountability for the entire business. And it's a great place. It's great to see businesses doing that because typically when you reach a point like that where you've got most, if not all, your people, your vendors even involved, and your customers maybe, that's a successful business. It's kind of like seeing somebody with a smile on their face. Very interesting, John. Start with the one-pager, thrash it out, make it happen. If you've got questions, send them to us, rick@irlonestar.com. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, I'm going to get into my tip of the week. I'm looking forward to talking about it. I'm not a social media expert, but I think there's some basic things as a business owner we need to understand about social media and being successful in it. So please stay with us. We'll be right back with you.
The Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service has been dedicated to educating Texans for over a century. In 1915, the Extension Program was established under the federal Smith-Lever Act to deliver university knowledge and agricultural research findings directly to the people. Ever since, AgriLife Extension programs have addressed the emerging issues of the day, serving diverse populations across the state. Texans turn to Extension for solutions in horticulture, agriculture, 4-H and youth, and family and consumer sciences. Extension agents respond not only with answers, but also with resources and services that result in significant returns on investment to boost the economy. Join us Fridays at 1 o'clock for the AgriLife Extension Hour.
Second Saturday Divorce Workshop provides unbiased information to help you understand your options and move forward with your life. This divorce workshop is for you if you are contemplating divorce, in the process of divorce, already filed for divorce, or post-divorce. You will explore the emotional, legal, and financial aspects of divorce from professionals who have guided others through divorce. For more information on this divorce workshop, contact secondsaturdaywoodlands.com or call 832-375-0900.
Well, you're listening to the Weekly Business Hour, and this is our final segment in today's show. We're going to get to the tip of the week shortly, but I want to mention to you that if you're listening to the program, you're a small business, and you're located or have business here in the Montgomery County area where we're broadcasting from in downtown Conroe, consider being a sponsor of the show. The radio station Lone Star Community Radio that produces this program and broadcasts it live on FM, also on television, and through the various medias that are available. They're a nonprofit, so if you sponsor, your money really is going to a good cause, and I encourage you, if you like the program, you want to promote your sponsorship. We give you a lot of recognition, and we deeply appreciate it. If you got questions, Rick at irlonestar.com. That's Rick at irlonestar.com. Well, let's get to that tip of the week. The One Best Consult tip of this week is, what is the key to making your business successful on social media? And I should say keys, plural, not key. You know, social media has become such a big thing, perhaps bigger in people's minds than it really is, but it has become, or can be, an effective way to advertise your business, especially if your business is local. To me, that's a non-brainer. Restaurants, local businesses, feed store, doesn't matter, hardware store, it goes on and on. If you're a locally based business, banks, everywhere, social media can really, really help you. But there's several things I think you need to consider. And I'm going to start out with the mindset that you own a small business, you have a handful of employees. And if you're like me, you're not, I understand computers, I work with them, but I have people that advise me, help me set up things. Social media is one of those things that if you're going to try to do this and you want to do it yourself, then you're going to have to take some time. You're going to have to learn a new skill. And I think that's important to understand. And one of the ways you can help yourself is limit yourself to one of the major platforms out there. Facebook, you've got LinkedIn for businesses, Twitter. Take one of them and take the time to learn that platform, how it works. There's a lot of information available. It's not that difficult if you'll take the time and understand it and read and experiment a little bit, that you can build your social media up. I think the second thing, and this is true in so many endeavors, is make sure you have a specific objective. What are you trying to do with your advertising? Trying to draw people into a store? You trying to build a list of customers so you can follow up with emails? Trying to drive them to an online store? Decide what your objective is and focus on that. Have that single objective, at least most importantly, initially. That way you can work on it, you can focus, you can do the reading, the studying, and you can focus and measure the success. Because that kind of leads to the third thing I want to talk about. You're going to have to test. You're going to have to experiment. You can sit there and say, well, my customers do this, they think this. Well, if you're talking to your customers and you're getting feedback constantly, yes, you should have a pretty good idea. But the reality is, if you take that information, regardless of the quality of it, put it out there. This is one of the real values of social media. You can put it out there. The cost is minimal, and you can see if they respond to it. You put an ad out there and you say, well, here, contact us. or come into the store and mention this word, you get a special discount. You can track that. It's black and white, it's numbers, and you can see if you've really been successful. One other item I think is important, and this again will be hard for some folks, that at least folks I know, to accept, is organic, meaning free for the most part, on social media is kind of dead. It's been out there forever. It's still there. But, I mean, you're talking about millions and millions of messages, and you've got to be able to cut through that, which means you're going to have to pay. You have to pay to advertise on Facebook, and you're going to have to pay more than you think ultimately, and I've got some experience with this, to get the kind of numbers, to get the leads that you want, to put names in your database of potential or existing customers. It takes time, and it's going to take a little money. I'm not talking thousands necessarily, but I would look at spending hundreds over a period of time, just like you would if you bought an ad in the newspaper, you had a brochure printed up, you did a mailing. It's not free, and so many people, including myself initially, well, it's free, let's do this SEO, on the internet, website, all that. It's still there, it's still valuable, don't misunderstand. But now there's so much out there. It's like driving down a highway and having a billboard every foot of the road. People are just getting hit with all this stuff as they drive down the road. So be willing to spend some money. It's very important to try to do that. I think if you'll follow those things and that you will commit yourself to it, again, personal time, you can hire an expert, and I recommend at some point you do that and turn it over, you outsource it to someone to do. Got to be careful. A lot of charlatans out there, but there's some quality people now that the industry's maturing and it's been around that can really help you drive the kind of results that you're focused on, that you need and want for your business. Well, I appreciate you joining us today. Hopefully you've enjoyed our program, and I encourage you, get in touch with Joseph Tung. If you got a question, he is a very affable individual. He enjoys being involved with small business. Again, you can reach him at joseph@tung, Tung.com, or just give him a phone call, 832-390-2237. And put it on your calendar to join us next week. We're live at 11 a.m. on Lone Star Community Radio, FM 104.5, 106.1, if you happen to be in the Conroe area, and available over the internet radio at that time live as well. So thank you again for joining us. Thank you for listening to the program. And as I always say, until next week, stay engaged and keep your focus on what's most important for your business. That's what really counts. Thanks.